Astrocast. I'm your host, Drew. Today is Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. A new moon is upon us. Today we have a very special episode for a special time of the year. It is the Astrocast's first birthday. If you were unaware, the official first birthday actually came, I guess, a little bit over a week ago now, maybe 2 weeks. It hasn't been long, but if you guys know, we have been on the air for just about a year now, and I think we're, up to episode 46, is it, I believe? So we've only missed a few weeks, 52 weeks in a year. We're up to 46, and very happy to be here. So I'd like to first thank all of my supporters on Patreon. If you would like to join us in our private Discord chat, which has been very, very rich as of late, I will say, please feel free to support the show by giving at patreon.com/the Astrocast. I can't make this show without you guys, so thank you so much for your support and really for everything that you do. You guys are more than just listeners, you're friends to me, so thank you so much for everything. I'm your host, Rue. You're listening to the Astrocast. This week we're doing something a little bit out of the ordinary. I think I say that almost every week. I was going back and listening to some old episodes, and I heard myself saying at the beginning, this week we're going to be doing things a little bit different, and I think I heard that 3 or 4 times over the course of a few episodes. But this week actually is a little bit different in that I actually sat down with our guest over the prior weekend, this weekend that just passed, and had a nice in-depth conversation about his channel, how he got to where he is, where he's going, what he'd like to do in the future, and kind of a little bit of everything in between. So if you haven't somehow looked at the title of this episode, you're in for quite a treat, because this week I sat down and spoke with Nico Carver of Nebula Photos. So very, very prominent YouTube astrophotographer personality, and really a super nice guy. Got to talk with him a little bit before and after the interview, and just very down to earth and really just exactly like he is in his videos. So definitely a very real and humble person. I very much appreciate people like that. I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank Nico for coming on the show, because I have reached out to, a lot of people over the last 3 or 4 months, and I've heard back from a few, but nothing super concrete. And to Nico's credit, I emailed him, and within a couple of hours, he emailed me back and said, I'd love to be on the show. So thank you very much for that, Nico. I really appreciate that. I know you're busy, but thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us on the Astrocast for a little bit. I will just briefly note, we had a little bit of an audio issue on my side. Nico's audio was perfect, of course, but I had to switch over to my USB mic at the last second. So the audio is not as good as normal this week, and you guys know how much that drives me crazy. So you can only imagine how much it was driving me crazy when I had somebody as special as Nico on the show. So if you can get past that, it's a great conversation. Without any further ado, here's Nico. Why don't you introduce yourself for anyone who may not know you?
Sure. So I'm Nico Carver. I run the Nebula Photos YouTube channel and Patreon. And my background isn't in astronomy. In high school and college, I wanted to be a filmmaker, I guess, like a director. And then so I went through college learning filmmaking. But then when it came time to have a career, I got sort of more practical and decided to get a master's degree in library science. And so I became an academic librarian. But then I found this great job for me because I was this academic librarian, which just means being a librarian at a college or university. But I found this job at the University of Delaware where I was helping run the multimedia center. And my job was basically just to teach college students how to make films, podcasts, posters.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was like every day teaching. So that's how I got sort of good at teaching multimedia software. Like Photoshop was a very common thing that I would teach every day. And I did that for 7 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
quite
And
a
then,
while.
so while I was there in Delaware, I got into astronomy, joined the Delaware Astronomical Society. And so I got so into astronomy that when I was looking at just sort of job boards and I saw there was a job for an astronomy librarian. So I was
Ooh.
like, oh, this looks just right up my alley.
Right.
So I got that job in Boston, and I did that for almost 4 years. And then most of it actually at home because of the pandemic.
Okay.
But then at the start of 2023, I was sort of successful enough with YouTube that I could do that full time. So my reasoning for not having a day job was just that my day job tied me to Boston, and I really wanted to like move somewhere darker. So but we were going back into the office because, you know, COVID was winding down. And so then it was just sort of like a tough decision, but I decided I want to move somewhere darker and try this full time. So
yes, I envy you so much on moving somewhere darker. That is such a huge life goal of mine, but my wife is just such a city person that it's hard. So we try to find a little bit of a balance in that. Like, she doesn't mind if I like go on dark sky trips and these sorts of things, but like ultimately, I think I'm going to end up either with a remote observatory, like a Starfront situation, where I just send all of my gear down there, or potentially building an observatory at our local club here for Charlotte, which is like Portal 4 on a good night skies, which are great, but not like top of the line great. So, I mean, you know, the difference between, you know, a 5 and a 1 is night and day. So,
but actually, I'd say even the difference between a 5 and a 4 is pretty dramatic.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Four gets into what I call a dark sky site on the East Coast. I know people out West wouldn't consider a Portal 4 dark, but like for me, that's a dark sky site, at least for photography.
When you can see the Milky Way pretty clearly overhead and you're like, oh, there it is. It just pops out at you. Yeah, that's a huge difference. Is that scale exponential, or did anyone ever actually... I actually did an episode on the origin of it, but
so it's not really based on anything except just sort of what John Bortle thought would be a good scale visually. And so one thing that people will point out is Bortle 4 is like a much bigger range of darkness than something like Bortle 3, 2, and 1.
Really?
Yes. And so a dark Bortle 4 can be pretty different than a bright Bortle 4 because it's actually a fairly big range.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
So there's weird things about it like that.
Yeah. That's cool. So where are you now? You're up in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I'm in Western New Hampshire. It's a Bortle 3 sky. It's a very small town, but then there's like closer, like small cities within like 30-40 minutes from me.
Okay, so you have the conveniences of modern life within a reasonable drive, basically. I got you. Okay. Was it scary at all for you when you decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and you kind of went all in? Like, what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, and part of it, and this is still playing out, is that the pandemic was like a really boom time for astrophotography, but especially like astrophotography on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
So that's when I got like really popular, but then I knew like, okay, that's going to die down and down and down. So I have to have like other, you know, things in the fire to keep this going as a business, because it can't just be YouTube.
It can't. Like you say, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. And I don't think a lot of people understand how much work goes into maintain. Like, don't get me wrong. I know you're doing what you love, and I'm sure that every day that you go to work, it's rewarding. But like, just gosh almighty, I do one episode a week that's 1 hour long generally. And the amount of time that I have to sink into just doing one episode a week, and it's audio only. So then when I start thinking about like having to, like, I've done a couple of video episodes of the show, And just the push was not worth the pull at the end of the day for me. So I can't imagine how busy you must be on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought like, oh well, if I quit my day job, I'll have so much more time, but it just didn't work out that way. I just
Right?
sink more time into other stuff,
It's
and it's
like
just like it fills the days. Yeah.
yeah, that it does. So was there any particular like inflection or turning point where you knew that you kind of had something special, or did you see like just a steady growth, or like anything in particular that kind of said, okay, well maybe this is the future for me, that made you step away from librarian work?
Yeah. So I mean, by today's standards, I guess people would say like I had success right away with YouTube, but like back then it wasn't a crowded space at all. There weren't that many people um, making sort of serious astrophotography videos. So I feel like it was easier just to like, yeah, everyone will see this video because there's not too many on YouTube. And I didn't really take it very seriously when I started the channel in Delaware. I was maybe making like one video every 6 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it was really, yeah, during COVID when I was home. I just got very lucky with the timing because I'd already been working on this video for months about shooting Orion Nebula without a star tracker, just like on a tripod, and then released it like right at the start of the pandemic. And so it was just like the best timing because people saw that and they were like, I actually have this gear. I can go do this. Yeah. And so that just took off. And that's when I started paying attention to the numbers and being like, oh, wow, this has over 100,000 views already. I guess it's going to be a big deal. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. I love that. It's funny too. The deeper I get into astrophotography, the more I go back to those simple setups. Like me personally, like any one of my friends or fellow members at the club will tell you that I love grabbing like a tripod, a star tracker, and a DSLR or mirrorless camera and just seeing what I can do with it. Do you have like a particular like favorite setup that you personally like to use on any given, night?
Yeah, I'm a wide field guy, so I don't, and that can mean different things, of course. Like wide field to some people mean Milky Way. I guess I like now deep sky the best. So for me, wide field is like from about 85 millimeters up to 400, meaning like you can. So that means a small telescope or a telephoto lens, and with that kind of setup, it can be very mobile, like you said. Like it can be on a star tracker. Last night I was on the Star Adventure GTI, which I really like. It's a star tracker size, but it has go-to.
Yes.
So if you use it like with an ASI Air, you can actually just like say, go to this object, and it finds it and it plate solves, and that just makes it really simple. So I like that kind of thing. Is simpler the better. I actually like what ZWO has done with that 2600 Air, like putting it all into one thing. I'm like, the simplicity of that is just really fun and makes it just
totally
really
agree.
easy. But you can get, but you can get really nice results too, because that's just a great sensor. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's just a matter of time before they put the guide sensor and the air and probably well, I don't know. You wouldn't build a rotator onto a camera. I suppose you could though, if you wanted to. But then again, you wonder like what the point is where they're like, all right, let's stop giving them 3 products in one when we can split it up into 2. But yeah, that 2600 is a great example of just making things all in one, simpler, better, etc. I got a Star Adventure GTI myself. It's funny. I bought a Ioptron Skyguider Pro. Yeah, Skyguider Pro. And this was my, I guess, second mount, I guess you could say, after my CEM 26. And within just a few weeks of using it, I was like, God, I missed this go-to functionality. I ended up getting the GTI shortly thereafter. So yeah, just an excellent all around little mount that you can set up. What do you think about smart telescopes? Like, I know we're shifting gears a little bit here, but like this is a topic that comes up a lot on the show, and so many of my fans love smart telescopes, and I just have so many mixed feelings about them. I've yet to actually go hands-on with one. I've seen them at the clubs many times. But what are your thoughts?
Well, it's funny timing because I've been working on this video for the past like 3 weeks, month. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
On the S30 and S50, the two popular ones by ZWO, just comparing them. They're very similar. I'm sort of giving it away, but I think actually the video might come out before this episode. But
Okay.
they're very similar, and like because so much of it is the work that they've done on the app, right? Like it's just like, and the app is the exact same between the two, and all the same functions are available. So the main difference is just going to be the field of view, but then they've also now allow you to sort of expand the field of view of either with that with a mosaic mode. And for me, that has made them way more interesting, because one thing I didn't like when I first reviewed them, at least the S50, was that everyone would just type in a object and it would go to it, and then your picture would look the same as everyone else's, because it was that same vertical orientation, whatever the crop is, and you don't get any choices over rotation or anything.
Yes.
So this mosaic mode has opened it up a lot creatively, and that's what's fun for me. So
absolutely,
I think they're improving, definitely.
I actually just today watched your video on is astrophotography considered art? And you were talking about composition in particular quite a bit on that video. And that was one of the things whenever I would see those first, batch of the S50 photos that were coming out, it's almost like a awkward focal length for the 50 specifically, because like it can't get the whole Orion Nebula, which is kind of like the first thing anyone's going to, point their telescope at. But adding that mosaic mode, like you say, it really does open up a whole wealth of new possibilities.
And then the other thing is, like, if you go long with one of these smart telescopes, like if you want to really put in the hours and do like 4 hours, it crops it in even further because of the alt-az nature. So you have all these rotational artifacts, and you basically just have to crop in and in and in until you only have maybe like a picture that's like 800 by 800 pixels or something. Because it's starting at just 1920. So, but the mosaic mode solves that too, because since it's tiling and taking all these different pictures, it eliminates the rotational artifacts.
That's awesome.
So if you put in 10 hours, it looks great. Like, yeah. So I'm really happy about that.
That really is ZWO's kind of secret sauce too, is just the flawless integration that they've had. Like for me, when I first got started, probably like a lot of people, well, maybe not now, but back when the pandemic was, full swing and astrophotography was starting its boom, I started with my laptop. I had a mount, an old DSLR camera, et cetera. And I very quickly was like, oh man, I don't like having all these different drivers. And I was confused. I'm like, should I be running planetarium software also? Like I was using Stellarium for GoTo, and then, astrophotography tools separately. And then I had PhD2 running over here. And you pretty quickly are almost overwhelmed by how many apps you have to run. And then the first time you pick up an ASI Air, you're just like on your phone and everything's right there. And it's just like, oh man. So like that, to me, like that has pushed the industry forward so much. And I'm just, a lot of people have mixed feelings about ZW. I personally am thankful that they've really pushed the momentum forward with the industry as a whole, just by making things simpler. It brings more people in. And I think ultimately, like, while I do have qualms with smart telescopes, if it's getting more people out under the night sky, like what can you possibly complain about? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really good point, that they've made it so easy with like, I guess just by hiring a bunch of like software engineers who actually know how to make things easy. Yep. And I guess the other companies just are not doing that. But it almost makes it so easy that it like loses something for me. And I know this might sound like weird, and like I don't mean to be like an old timer who's like, you should learn all this stuff the hard way, but like the software engineers basically solve every little issue like with the app. So like you don't have like focus, no longer a thing. Like it's just like you turn on a little switch and it does the autofocus. It's just like, and it's just like, so you don't really learn that much about like learning astrophotography, which for some people like me who like sort of like the problem solving aspects of astrophotography, it feels like I'm missing something with the smart scopes just because they're so seamless. It's just like you plop them down and it goes.
That's 100% my beef with them too. It's just like you don't really learn anything. And to me, like why I love astronomy and astrophotography so much and why it's such a big, important part of my life now is because it's opened my mind up to so many other things that I was just completely unaware of, before I got into it. And every time I learn something new, I'm like, yes, it's like this, the first time you successfully like really nail a polar alignment, there's just this feeling of accomplishment that you get when you've been out 6-7 times in the middle of a field or wherever you were first getting started. And then like, that sense of victory and accomplishment, and just like any other hobby, you want to get better as you go. And not to say that you can't get better with, a smart telescope, but, I do think that for the vast majority of people, like, it's an expensive hobby. Everybody knows this, but that is lowering the barrier of entry. And I feel like if somebody really gets into a smart telescope, for lack of better words, they'll probably end up moving along to getting a more serious setup, for a lack of better words. So
yeah, and it's sort of a jack of all trades thing where it has a nice field of view for the sun, the moon, many deep sky objects. Well, like if you get started with what another option would be like a Rokinon 135 and a full frame DSLR or something, that's going to be great for deep sky. But on the sun and the moon, they're just going to be really small in that field of view. And so it won't be that sort of wow factor that the S50 gives you on, because often I forget, like the sun and the moon are also very popular objects for beginners.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So
particularly with the moon, it's funny how quickly you come to loathe the moon as an astrophotographer. I remember the first time I was like, man, I wish the moon wasn't out,
Right.
that hits you pretty quick. But yeah, I mean, most people who are, just learning, getting into astrophotography, that's the first thing they're going to look at, outside of things like the Orion Nebula or what have you. So very popular targets, like you say. Have you done any lunar photography or solar photography with the smart scopes?
Yeah, I did the total solar eclipse with, with the smart scopes, and that was fun. Yeah, I was actually really pleasantly surprised by, like, because I did video with the S50, and during that whole transition from like Bailey's beads into totality, I took off the filter, and it just did wonderfully. I was really happy with like what came out of that. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I did a comparison when I was talking about this a couple months ago, and I tried to build like the budget Rokinon 135 rig for like a similar price point to something like an S50, and you just can't, unfortunately. I mean, you can come close, don't get me wrong, if you're willing to, like go on the secondhand market, cloudy nights, those sorts of things. But like,
what I ended up doing to get there was I got I did that video too. I think I did the 3D printed star tracker.
Yep.
Which is like that gets you down to like $200 for the star tracker or something.
Oh,
but then you can't get the Rokinon 135 because it's like, even used, that's going to put you like down like 300 or something. Yeah. So I was using the 75 to 300 Canon,
like the kit lens.
Yeah, with the kit lens, which is okay for once you have the star tracker. So
and you could certainly say that you probably get better image quality at the end of the day, even with an older one, right?
It's debate compared to the S50. It's debatable. People will have different opinions on that.
Yeah,
I still like it because you can just change out the optics if you want to upgrade
that. Yeah.
And so, but it's very different, I guess I would say. It's like, because it's just, you're not going to have that like really well sampled stars if you really zoom in on it, but you can get so much more because especially if you use fast optics, you can start picking up dust a lot faster than the C-Star could, all these kinds of, so there's trade-offs.
Kind of blew my mind the first time I pointed my Rokinon 135 wide open at F2, right? For that. Yeah. At F2, at the Pleiades. And I think I did 4 hours. I had it as a secondary rig that was running that night. And a couple of days later, I throw them all in PixInsight, and like I start blinking through the photos, and I'm like, is that no way? And then I do a stack, and sure enough, like just dust everywhere. The Pleiades was almost just gone, because the dust is so prevalent in that area. So yeah, there's something to be said for fast glass, that's for sure.
Yep.
Hey Nico, I heard you mention our sponsor, Dark Dragons Astronomy, in one of your videos. What do you think of our sponsor, Dark Dragons Astronomy? Yeah, wow, Rue. That's so crazy that you should ask. Dark Dragons Astronomy, actually makes the coolest astro stuff.
What's going on in here?
What the Who are you?
I think the real question here is, why are you lying to your listeners, Rue?
I kind of forgot to ask Nico about our sponsor, but I didn't want to bother him again for an obvious ad-lib session.
And you thought you could use deepfake technology to impersonate your esteemed guest, dishonor Nico's voice, despite your epic failure to plan accordingly?
Yeah, I guess I sort of did do that.
Now, Rue, sometimes being honest with your listeners is hard, but being honest with yourself, that's rougher than a cloudy day on a dark sky trip, or like leaving the lens cap on.
Oh my god, are you?
Of course I am! Now let Captain Cumulus clear the skies, and do you a solid, you know what to do.
This advertisement was brought to you by our sponsors, Dark Dragons Astronomy. For all your observatory needs, it's DDA. Find out more at darkdragonsastro.com.
Now then, I'm off to clear the skies and hearts of any would-be ne'er-do-wells.
Hey, that was pretty good. Now about this hole, do you have an insurance agent I can call, or?
Captain Cumulus!
What a friggin' jerk.
Have you, speaking of fast glass, have you ever shot with like a rososcope?
No, I've been, I have had friends that have had them, so I've, sort of used them with my friends, but I've never owned one.
Yeah, I haven't. It's something I've thought about.
I early on I had a Newtonian and was using it more for, or I shouldn't say using it for imaging. I was just trying to use it for imaging.
Yeah. Seeing what you can do.
And I was like, but I think I just get too obsessed with fiddling and just trying to like make it perfect. And I think I have that same issue with the Rasa. But now that I have the observatory, I'm tempted again to do something like that because, then it could just sort of sit there and be more tuned.
Yes. Yeah, you could probably get the best results out of it. So speaking of your observatory, what was the process like over that? I was able to follow it obviously through your build videos and everything. How long did it take you, if you don't mind me asking, from start to finish when you were actually going through your process? Because this is something I'm about to embark on. I've been talking about it for the last year, and in the spring, we're finally breaking ground.
I delayed a lot, and then so I ended I wanted to start in June or May or something when it would have made a lot of sense. But then because I just sort of procrastinated and was just thinking I'm not ready, I don't have enough money or whatever, I didn't break ground till early September.
Okay.
So then I didn't finish until January.
Okay. So yeah, it's a process.
Yeah. So I got very lucky though, because we just had a very mild winter. Was that 2 years ago now? And so it worked out sort of, but
so you were still able to work on the, weekends and what have you.
Yeah. And I was still able to work on it. And even though it was sort of funny because it was I had the floor done, I covered that. And then I was making the walls, and it would occasionally snow while I was working. And then I would just have to
oh man,
brush off the snow and then just keep going. I don't know. And so I wouldn't suggest that. I would really suggest doing it over the summer, but that's what I ended up doing. And then, and it was really, so during that time, the only videos I put up on YouTube were the observatory build videos, if I remember right. And it was 4 months. So I was a little bit worried about that because I was just working on it every day.
Yeah.
But it worked out.
I'd say so. Yeah. And it's a beautiful observatory too, if you don't mind me saying. Very, very nice. What are you running in it right now?
I have the main thing I'm using is a Skywatcher EQ6R, and then on that I have a triple lens setup for this project I'm working on. So it's two Sigma 105s and a Canon 85, and
nice.
Yeah, so I'm just doing these big mosaics with that. And then I have the second Pier, and on that I have a really expensive mount that I got a while ago, but like have not reviewed, haven't done anything with it. But it's just sort of like, so I use it for big telescopes. So if I get sent like a big refractor or something, but then my long-term plan there is to maybe try a mirror scope again, like a big Newtonian or a Rasa or something on the big mount.
You sound like me a lot in the fact that you just love the wide field stuff. So maybe don't necessarily feel the need to get one of the giant.
I'm dragging my heels with it. I know a lot of people would be like, I have this really nice mount, and they would go right into it. But I'm just sort of dragging my heels because I'm like, I know if I start doing it, I'll probably get into it, but it doesn't really excite me at this point.
I completely understand that. I mean, I get more excited by doing like a 50 millimeter shot. Like I was shooting the whole winter circle at 50 millimeters a month or so ago and just loved it. And then processing the photos and getting the foreground shots. And I mean, that's almost like Milky Way scale type photography. And then just like comparing that with my 135 shots and then comparing that with my bigger scope, which is like 446 millimeters, I think, of focal length. And just, I don't know, there's so much you can do in this hobby that like you're never going to run out of options. So I suppose just enjoy all the wide field stuff while you can until you get bored and then slap a giant Schmidt Cassegrain on there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Do you have any favorite targets this time of year? Winter, summer, otherwise, but obviously we're in winter right now.
I think that probably my favorites just go back to like, you know, when I first got my first images, I like really loved. And so that took, you know, probably 2 or 3 years of experimentation with deep sky. But the first kind of images I really loved were the Spaghetti Nebula and the Flying Bat and Squid, which are both dim emission nebulae, but they're really big in the sky. They take up a lot of the sky. So you need faster, wider optics to capture them. And now they're increasingly like popular targets, I'd say. But like, back then, I feel like they were considered way more challenging. I feel like now it's like there's so many options for these like really good, wider, fast telescopes that like a lot of people are getting these things.
I remember being blown away when I realized the scale of the Spaghetti Nebula the first time I saw it, and then just being like, "Oh my God, how have I not heard of this?" It's just like so cool. And then. I'm sorry. Is it Squid and Bat Nebula? Right. Yeah, I always get the two confused.
That one's not actually good right now. I mean, you could still get it in the early evening. But if you're far north as me,
is it in Cepheus?
Cepheus, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I thought so. Yeah. But you're right though. On the popularity though, that one really has exploded in this past year. I've seen more photos of that than, you know, a lot of the other nebula that you typically see. So, you get any good images of it this go around?
Yeah,
nice.
I did the Flying Bat and Squid recently, released that recently, and then Spaghetti I'm working on again. I think, you know, the first time I captured it, I did it with the 200 millimeter lens, and so this time I'll do a mosaic, probably 2 or 3 panels or something to get a little bit more details on it.
You know, one thing I wanted to ask you, I want your opinion on this. We're talking about wide field stuff, cameras, camera lenses, etc. One of the things that I have noticed that really kind of drives me nuts, for a lack of better words, is I'm a Canon guy. So I shoot Canon and I have all these RF lenses, and I love my RF class because I do other photography as well. But I love experimenting and playing with it for astrophotography. Being that they're like focused by wire lenses and not fully manual lenses, you can't connect them to like a ZWO camera. Okay, that's fine. I'll use my Canon R5. But then like it opens up these questions of, should I add guiding? What kind of mounting options are there out there for the, you know, R5 and R7 that I have, and those sorts of things? Do you ever do any photography like that? Just, I mean, I know obviously you do like your camera lens and all that, but Do you ever just take your regular camera and a 200 millimeter lens, slap it on a star tracker and say, let's go? And if so, do you use guiding when you do that? Or is the field wide enough where you're comfortable with the polar alignment being good and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I do all of that. I do Canon RF stuff with and without guiding. A favorite thing of mine is just like the original Star Adventure, or it could be any Star Tracker without GoTo or anything. No guiding, no computer, nothing. Just like the Canon DSLR or mirrorless, the lens, the Star Tracker, and an intervalometer, and that's it. And just do it that way. And I that's what I bring to star parties, because like I don't want something complicated at star parties. I just want to sort of like, a lot of people bring really cool things and I like seeing them, but for me, especially if like I'm doing the speaker thing, I just like to plop down something simple and just go
and let it go. And like you say, the great thing is, if you set it up properly, you can get jaw-dropping results with just a star tracker and a camera. That's really all you need. You ever heard of you just made me think of it when you said Canon. I think it's called Magic Lamp. Is it called? It's
Magic Lantern. Yeah,
Magic Lantern. I just recently found out about this like a month ago. We were talking about it on the show and I installed it on one of my old Rebels and I was just like, holy crap, how have I never heard of this?
Yeah, it's really cool. It one of the best things it does for astrophotography, it adds the internal intervalometer, which works perfect. So yeah, whenever that's available for an older Canon, I put it on there. You really
wouldn't dare put it on one of your new mirrorless ones, though, would you?
I don't. I probably wouldn't, but they also haven't developed it for those. So
yeah, good point. That settles that. Speaking of kit, are there any underrated tools, accessories? I'm talking like dew heaters, flat taking tools, tripods, ball heads, those sorts of things. Like anything in particular that you're a big fan of that helps your flow?
I want to look at my notes because I feel like I had something for this, but I forgot what I said.
That's no problem. I know it's a little bit of an obscure question.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Okay. So I have this thing I bought at a hardware store. You can get it like Harbor Freight or Home Depot or whatever, where it's like a screw organizer or something, or like small tool organizer, where it's just a plastic box with a clear plastic top, and then it has all these little dividers in it. Yep. Yeah. And it's fairly big, maybe like a couple feet across. And what I do with that is I just put in spare parts of all different kinds, like extra cable, extra screws, extra little spacers, everything that I could possibly need. And whenever I go to a dark site, I bring that with me, and it's saved me so many times. It's because like you think you have everything configured how you want it with your kit, but then you realize, oh no, I actually need this, and then you don't have it. So I had that experience enough times that now I just bring this box and it has all different little parts, and
that's smart to have them organized like that too. Because I also have a box that I bring to star parties, but it's not organized. I've got like oh my God, I hope it's in this box. You know what I mean? But that's a great idea. I'm gonna take you up on that, and I'm gonna go pick up one of those because I could see how that could come in quite handy.
Well, and a lot of people ask, like, I often tell people if when they're having connection problems or something, like, did you check the cable? Did you try replacing the cable? And then they'll come back at me with, well, why would it be the cable? I never have cables fail in my office. And I'm like, we're putting them outside in freezing temperatures. A lot more can go wrong. It often is the cable. So
and it's not like we're putting dew heaters on them either, right? On the cable. So that's a good point. Yeah, they're only rated to last for so long, and that's like indoor office use. So when you put them outside in freezing weather with moisture and everything, they can absolutely fail. So good point. How do you balance technical precision with creative expression in astrophotography? And this kind of harkens back to your last video that I was talking about earlier a little bit. But what is your personal take on that as far as scientific accuracy versus putting your own kind of artistic spin on the image and really making it yours? Where do you find that balance?
Yeah. So for me, I come from this to astrophotography from the photography world. Like, I didn't come to it being an astronomer or even like into astronomy as like a visual observer. So I think that people have different like feelings about this based on like how they got into astrophotography, probably. But for me, like creative expression is paramount to how I enjoy the hobby. I'm open to like other people's viewpoints on this. If they want to think that like there's a correct scientific way to process, and I'll definitely hear them out and see like why they think that I should be doing it a certain way or something. But it's also interesting for me, like, because I was an astronomy librarian, so I've been in sort of like the professional world of astronomy, and professional astronomers see what any of us like amateur astrophotographers do as just like pretty pictures. It's not like they're looking at our pictures and being like, this one is more scientifically accurate than this one, because as soon as you start, what stretching is basically basically changing all the values in the picture using a curve. Like whenever you use any stretching tool, you're wrecking sort of the accuracy of the data. So astronomers, get the numbers they need out of the pictures when it's still linear, when it just looks like a black picture. As soon as you make a non-linear stretch, it's ruined. You could undo it, I guess, if you just put undo, but like as soon as you make a non-linear stretch and save it, there's no scientific accuracy to that picture anymore.
That's a very good point.
So anyways, that's maybe going a little too
in depth. No. I mean, it actually aligns perfectly, because it's just like what we're doing at the end of the day is photography. And like, is there more science behind it? Sure. You could say that, and that we're, tracking the stars and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm with you 100% on this one.
Well, then another viewpoint I think is interesting is I've heard people say like, we should treat astrophotography as nature photography, because it's like, if you think of it, we're like photographing a part of the universe just like nature photographers do. My issue with that is our process has to be so different from a nature photographer that like if you're entering into a nature photography contest, they might have rules, about how much processing you could do to the picture. If you tried to apply those rules to astrophotography, it would be ridiculous. That it wouldn't work.
You would have no contest.
Yeah. So I think that it's going to be hard to ever, I don't really see it happening in my lifetime that we're going to come up with this like agreed upon set of guidelines or standards for what is natural astrophotography, because the processing is so intense and sort of unnatural from the way that we think of natural processing with like just a DSLR and lens during the daytime. So
I love that argument in the pro artistic. It had never even occurred to me, though. You're 100% right. Like when you go from linear to non-linear with a stretch, that pretty much does it, because then you're putting your spin on it at that point, and the accuracy is no longer there. So well, let's switch gears a little bit. How about apps? Do you have any like favorite websites, applications, apps, phone apps, etc., otherwise that you love to use?
So I know Stellarium is incredibly popular, and there is a lot to it, but for some reason that's not my favorite planetarium. I use more Sky Safari on my phone, and it's a paid app, but I don't know, for some reason I just really love it. It just does a lot. And then
Sky Safari is great
for planning. Again, you can use Stellarium, which is free, but there's another free option, which is telescopius.com. And I like that because it's less sort of like, how do I want to describe it? When you type in an object, right away you can see other people's photos of it, which is cool. But then it also, I just like how it has these little charts that are really easy to read for like how high it will be in the sky at different times that night, but also in different times of the year. And then right below that, there's a simulator where you can see how it looks with the survey imagery. And so just having all of that on one page for each target, I just think makes a lot of sense for me.
I totally agree. And when you're doing things like planning a dark sky trip, maybe that's months in advance, a tool like that is so invaluable. particularly with like easily being able to see where it'll be in that part of the night sky. Because like for me, I do a once a year dark sky trip out to Bortle 1 skies with a close friend of mine, and the planning is so important. You know what I mean? Because like I know how many cameras I'm going to have running. I don't know how many nights of clear weather I'm going to have, because unfortunately where we go, like, you know, it's a crapshoot. The first year we did it, we got great weather every night, and it was just the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. The second year we went, though, it was, I think we got 1.5 decent nights out of it. So, you know, knowing what you're going to be shooting, how high it's going to be in the sky, and those sorts of things is just so important when you're working in a limited time frame. It never occurred to me until I was actually on a trip in the middle of the summertime, Milky Way season in the Northern Hemisphere, how little nighttime we get. Did you have a moment when you realized this, when you're like, wow, there's only like 4 hours of actual dark night in the, you know, height of the summer?
Yeah, I'd never thought about it before I started doing this, honestly. Yeah. And I mean, now that there's all these debates about daylight savings time, I'm of course on the side of like, I just want standard time all year, because that would give us more time for our hobby. But
100% with you on that. Oh man. What about favorite astro photos you've taken? Obviously you're in a unique position because so many of us have luckily gotten to share in your astro photos that you've taken over the years, but are there any in particular that really stand out to you? And maybe they got a story behind them. Maybe it's just the quality of the image, but are there any that really stand out for you over your career thus far?
Probably just, this is going to sound really weird, but my maybe not. My very first astro photo, I still think is great.
I love that.
I think a lot of people would like say like, oh, my very first astro photo is terrible, and I had so much to learn. But my very first astro photo was the Aurora Borealis in Iceland. So it's like, wow. Yeah. And so that's how I got into all this, is like, I was on a trip to Iceland. I got to see the Aurora, take photos of it. And when I, you know, started looking at those photos, I was just like amazed at how cool they were, how much color there was, and seeing the pinpoint stars behind the Aurora. I just thought it was so cool looking. So yeah, my very first one is my most memorable.
That's awesome. Probably. I love that. Mine is rather forgettable, though. I do have it. I've got it saved a couple places online up in the cloud, and I love looking at that photo occasionally. And, you know, just looking over all of my stuff for the past 5 years, year after, well, I guess 4 years, 5 years now. Yeah, it's 2025. So yeah, I started in 2020, like a lot of people with the pandemic, but just being able to like see your progression as time goes on and be like, you know, here's the rosette I took in 2021. Here's the rosette I took in 2024. Like, wow, look at the detail. You know what I mean? The difference and what have you. I always love those. What about like future goals? What does the future look like for yourself or Nebula Photos? Do you have any like bucket list items that you're going to want to check off as time marches on?
Yeah. So I'm working that triple lens setup that I have. I'm working on a big mosaic of Cepheus, and that's sort of a bucket list thing for me. I've done it in different versions before, but this one's going to be really serious, like spend years on it kind of thing.
Nice.
And then I want to turn that into a book. So basically the base image for sort of like identifying where everything is would be this big mosaic. But then with my Starfront rig, I would take a bunch of like closer up pictures and
of all the individual items,
of all the individual objects. Yeah. So I want to turn that into like a Cepheus book.
That
cool.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I would definitely buy one of those. And I love the idea of focusing in on one constellation that you really love. I have a bonus question on here. I'm starting to figure out, I don't know if I even need to answer it ask you it at this point, but do you have a favorite constellation?
Yes. So I would say right now, at least it's Cepheus, but I have both. Can you see that here? Cepheus and Cygnus on my arm. So
I love that.
Those
Cygnus
are my favorite. my favorite two.
Yes.
And for a long time, I would have said Cygnus. But I got these at the same time, sort of knowing that I like them both. Yeah.
Were you like having a hard time deciding between one or the other?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and I was just sort of like, I think they would look cool, and these are actually sort of like accurate in how they're spaced and everything. So
I love that, and that's I've been thinking for a long. I've only got one tattoo. I got it when I was. If you can see, it's a little camera. It's a little. Yeah. That's the only one. And my wife, she's got like, gosh, probably 8 tattoos. I think she's got quite a few. And astronomy, photography, I'm like that. I don't mind stamping because it just means so much to me, and I'm probably going to do something similar in the very near future. So I realize that we're sitting here talking on camera, but being that this is an audio only podcast, Nico was showing us he's got some awesome tattoos of constellations, their outlines along with the lines that interconnect them, of both Cepheus and the Cygnus constellation. So very, very, very cool look. So that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you joining me today, Nico. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I know that a lot of our listeners are big fans of yours. If you somehow are into astrophotography and have not heard of Nebula Photos, please go check out his YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and search for Nebula Photos, he'll come right up. You won't miss him. Personally, my favorite astrophotographer on YouTube. So take that for what it means, but greatly appreciate you being on the show, and certainly hope to have you back sometime. Maybe after that book comes out, you can come on and talk about it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Rue. I had a great time. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thanks so much.
And that is our episode for this week. Thank you once again to Nico Carver for coming on the show. Very, very thrilled to have you on. And like I said, the door is always open, Nico. You got my email, so please feel free to reach out. And if you have somehow made it all the way to my podcast in your astrophotography journey and have not checked out Nebula Photos on YouTube, then why are you wasting your time here? Go check out Nico's channel immediately after finishing this episode, because you are in for a treat. Just search for Nebula Photos on YouTube. I'll obviously link it in the show notes as well. Definitely go give his channel a subscription and, like a few recent videos after you have a look. Excellent, top-notch content, and truly my favorite creator amongst all of the astronomers on YouTube. But thanks again for coming on the show. I'm sure everybody greatly appreciated getting to hear a little bit of your origin story and just get to know a little bit about the man behind the camera. So thanks so much for that. That's it, guys. So I hope that you're all out, hopefully enjoying some clear skies. I will say we've got a lot of weird stuff going on right now in my life personally. So I don't know necessarily, we might miss an episode or two in the future. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of up in the air right now, but I'll give out more info on that as it's available. And you can always follow us on Facebook or any of our other socials if you'd like to keep up with the show. So for recommendations this week, I can really only think of one because it's kind of all I've been doing in my free time. And that is the PC remake of Final Fantasy VII, which is the second part in the 3-part series. But Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it has recently released on PC. This is not one of the first RPGs I ever played, but one of the first like epic RPGs, I guess you could say, I ever played. I remember this game completely blowing our minds when it came out on PlayStation back in the day. And, it's incredible what they've done with the remake. When I initially heard that it was going to be 3 different games, I was very skeptical, but they've done an excellent job. The new second part feels like a entirely new game. It's very fresh. They managed to keep the story virtually the same, but kind of make some key changes. And I won't give out any spoilers, but it is, explained in the story why these things are different to some degree. So if you are a fan of the Final Fantasy series, just heads up, that's available. Obviously, it's been on PlayStation, but it finally came out on PC. So if you're a PC Master Race person like myself who enjoys a good Japanese RPG, that one's for you. If not, just wait till next week and I'll probably name another awesome book. I'm pretty good at those. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the Astrocast this week. I'm your host, Rue, and as always, clear skies.